To begin this morning with the renewed efforts to rally support from voters ahead of the midterm elections.
Yeah, Democrats are planning some big moves this weekend, hoping to gain momentum in several key battleground states. Many of those states, including Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Colorado, voted blue in the 2020 presidential election. But just 2 years later, support for Democrats has waned. Now, party leaders are going all out to keep control of both the House and the Senate. NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray joins us now for more on this election preview. Mark, good morning to you, and let's start in Georgia. Former President Barack Obama will hold a rally there later today. Then he'll head to Wisconsin and Michigan on Saturday. Our very own Shaq Brewster spoke with incumbent Wisconsin Governor Evers about Obama's visit. Let's take a listen.
What do you hope to get from the former President Obama's visit?
Well, he's always right on. I mean, we had him 4 years ago, and he was outstanding. And people will be energized, and they understand what a great world leader he is. And I expect that we're going to get more people out to vote. That's the bottom line. This race is close, and the more people that we get out to vote, the best chances we have to win.
All right, so Mark, what do you think the Democrat strategy is here in turning to Obama in this final push before the election?
Yeah, Stephen, this is all about getting out the vote, and we are definitely in rally season. And Barack Obama, the former president, remains the Democrats' top surrogate to be able to do these types of events, even 6 years after leaving office, 14 years after first winning the presidency back in 2008. And a lot of this is just to galvanize rank-and-file Democratic voters, and particularly key African-American voters. That's why we're going to see the former president in Atlanta rallying for Raphael Warnock as well as Stacey Abrams, and then, as you mentioned, off to Wisconsin and also in Michigan tomorrow. And one of the things that our NBC News poll ended up finding when it looked at overall enthusiasm was that some enthusiasm has been waning in urban America, and including with crucial Black voters. And that's just one poll, but it shows a reason why you're seeing the former president really trying to get the vote out, because in these battlegrounds, in these close races, every single vote matters.
Mark, let's talk about the current president now. President Biden and Vice President Harris are also making appearances for a really key race we've been talking a lot about this week after a debate. They're fundraising with Democratic Senate candidate John Fetterman at a Pennsylvania Democratic dinner party later tonight. Does President Biden have an advantage in Pennsylvania, and what can the vice president do to boost support here? I mean, especially, like I said, after performance in the debate this week earlier was less than stellar, according to many people. What do you think can happen here?
Well, this is Scranton Joe Biden, and so he does definitely have Pennsylvania roots. Pennsylvania is a state that he has visited as much as almost any other state as president. And what is going to be interesting is that we are seeing both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris share the stage, something they often don't do for this fundraising event we're going to see in Philadelphia later tonight. It is notable, however, though, this isn't the kind of same rally that we're going to see Barack Obama do for Raphael Warnock and for Stacey Abrams. This is going to be more of a fundraising event. And Joe Biden has had a kind of a different role for Democrats, hitting the fundraising circuit, doing virtual fundraising events, doing actual official White House event in some of these battleground states and districts. So not your traditional rally.
Definitely want to watch, though, Mark. And if we're talking a big picture here, if you can, give us a larger view of this. Many of these races are neck and neck, and Democrats on the defensive here. What do they need to do to get voters out this final week before the midterms?
Yeah, it's just kind of events all like these, what you're seeing. You're raising money, having rallies to galvanize rank and file Democrats, winning over persuadable voters. Stephen, as you ended up mentioning, the last couple of weeks or so, polls show that the political winds are blowing at the Republicans' backs. And a lot of key races have kind of moved from lean Democrat to toss-up. Republicans seem to have, quote unquote, the momentum and the advantage. But I do remember just 2 years ago when all the polls were blowing in the Democrats' directions. And while Joe Biden ended up winning the presidency, Democrats didn't do as well as they thought they would do. And so sometimes these kind of like looking how the political winds are blowing, the ways that the polls are all moving, could sometimes provide some false positives or false negatives on what the real situation is. And we're not really going to know what the true environment is until we end up start counting those votes on November 8th.
The suspense is building, getting down to the wire there. All right, Mark Murray, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Now, the economy is one of the biggest issues on voters' minds. And just yesterday, new figures showed economic growth turned positive for the first time this year. The gross domestic product in the third quarter rose by 2.6%, and that beat estimates. Here to help us understand what this all means is Barron's reporter Carlton English. Carlton, thanks so much for joining us this morning. So this is, as we've seen in many polls, one of the most important things, if not the most important thing to many voters. So after this period of negative growth, the economy finally turns positive in the third quarter. Just tell us, how does that happen? Is there somebody who can take, responsibility in a positive way for this? And also, does it ease recession fears?
Yeah, so, you get the headline number, which was that 2.6 annual growth rate that you noted, but you always have to dive into the details here. And one of the biggest contributors to that growth was the U.S. exporting more oil and gas. Now, the reason the U.S. is doing that, of course, is because troubles Europe is facing in light of the war in Ukraine. So what you also saw in the numbers was that the rise in consumer spending, it accelerated, but not quite as much as hoped. And when you look at the U.S. economy, historically, about 70% of the U.S. economy is you and I buying stuff, shopping, going out to restaurants, spending. So that's the part that you really need to see the strength in to have a little bit more confidence about this GDP figure that we got. Definitely love to see a positive number. I don't want to minimize that, but you really need to see that faster than anticipated growth in GDP spending to really feel confident about those numbers.
Let's also talk about another indicator and another thing that so many people are thinking about just as they're trying to make decisions for their families. Of course, the housing market. Mortgage rates are at a 21-year high. The average rate on a 30-year mortgage is now more than 7%. Do you see any relief on the horizon for home buyers? Will this stabilize anytime soon?
Yeah, so as long as the Federal Reserve is intent on raising interest rates, we're probably going to see rates on mortgages continue to tick up. And that really does put pressure on home buyers because, yes, now you may see that home prices are going down, and some people may get excited about that. But because we have seen mortgage rates more than double this year, housing affordability becomes a problem because, you look at the math and you're like, 3% to 7%, it doesn't seem that big. But then when you actually do the math on what that means for a monthly payment, you're seeing monthly payments on a mortgage going up by hundreds, sometimes even more than $1,000 a month. And that really crimps affordability. So housing is going to continue to be a very tough spot.
Yeah, that 3 to 7% might sound like a small little range, but when we really get down to the dollars of it, it's not necessarily. You mentioned those interest rates. Let's talk about next week's Fed meeting. Markets expect another big rate hike, but then some economists believe those increases could start to shrink. What's your take, especially as we really haven't seen inflation cool?
Yeah, the other data point that we're going to be getting early next week is going to be the jobs report. And jobs have remained strong. And that's, one of the Fed's two mandates. So, yes, we obviously want to see a healthy jobs report. But unfortunately, in terms of the market, in terms of an economic outlook, you run into this good news is bad news type scenario. So when the Fed gets that data on jobs, that's going to inform their further rate hiking path. It's likely that we're starting to see the effects of the previous hikes, and they were at unprecedented, but historic levels over the last few months. And I think the Fed is going to realize that it can slow the pace. But again, we are very clearly in a rate hiking environment.
All right, Carlton English, thank you so much. Something so many people are thinking about right now as they're making decisions this holiday season. We appreciate your time.
Well, it's been more than 5 months since the deadly shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. But this morning, there are fresh calls for the resignation of one of the state's top police officials. And many of those calls are coming from the families of the victims. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky brings us the latest.
Inside Texas DPS headquarters, Uvalde families fighting through pain.
You basically lit a match and you set the town on fire. It's time for you, sir, to keep your word and offer your resignation.
Demanding DPS Director Stephen McCraw step down.
Are you a man of your word? Absolutely. Then resign.
McCraw at the center intended to update the ongoing shooting investigation.
But I can tell you this right now. DPS is an institution, okay, right now, did not fail the community. Plain and simple.
The school massacre in May now leaves the town in perpetual mourning. This as parent fury is growing louder over new body cam video obtained by NBC affiliate WOAI during the botched response by multiple law enforcement agencies.
This is so sad, dude, that he shot kids, bro.
In it, you see Sergeant Juan Maldonado, the first trooper fired from the internal investigation, approached by multiple officers outside Robb Elementary.
What's the safest way to do this? I'm not trying to get clapped out.
And near the very classrooms where the gunman opened fire.
Does anybody know if there's 9 kids in it? It's been about an hour.
It's disgusting. It makes me nauseated. They knew our kids were right behind that hallway. In that room, they were bleeding to death.
Uvalde plans to pay tribute to the 21 lives lost this weekend in an event called Remember Their Names. Meanwhile, the man in charge of Texas DPS stressing he's not leaving.
And with at least one officer fired and multiple facing termination, maybe you plan on giving your resignation?
No, not right now.
Not right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
And tonight, it is not just families of those lost in Uvalde calling for the director to resign. Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez, who represents Uvalde, is now saying what Democratic lawmakers have been saying for months, calling for Director McCraw to resign immediately. Morgan Chesky, NBC News, Austin.
All right, a lot to watch there. Morgan, thank you.
Now, a homicide investigation is underway in northeastern Oklahoma this morning after 8 people were killed in a house fire. It happened in a neighborhood called Broken Arrow Thursday afternoon, and while authorities have not released any of the victims' names, they have confirmed a family of 8, 2 adults and 6 children lived in the home. Officials have not released any other details about the fire, saying the investigation is complex and ongoing.
Turning now to a wave of respiratory illnesses among children, which is now spreading to more parts of the country, even in warmer areas where cases are pretty rare. NBC national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has the latest from Arizona as hospitals work on new techniques to try to keep up with that spike.
Phoenix Children's Hospital behind me is not at capacity, but other hospitals across the country are getting there as concerns grow over the potential for a triple threat this winter. Inside Phoenix Children's Hospital, Cheyenne Childers' 2-month-old son Ryder is fighting RSV.
Terrifying. It's a serious illness, with him being this young. He doesn't have an immune system to fight it off.
This here in Arizona, cases of RSV are up 344% over a typical season. It's a common virus, but it's affecting more kids because of lower immunity after isolating during the pandemic.
Did you ever think that this respiratory illness would be so serious?
No. When I first heard about it, I thought it was just something small.
Now, pediatric hospitals across the country, even in warmer climates, are bracing for a rough winter.
COVID-19 combined with a potentially bad influenza season, and now we're seeing RSV going up at the same time. That obviously makes us concerned that we might get into this triple pandemic situation.
A key part of the fight against RSV here, what Phoenix Children's calls a first-of-its-kind digital data surveillance program. Known as Watcher, it uses a predictive algorithm to forecast the children at risk of deteriorating quickly.
Pediatric patients are different than adults because they have very subtle changes in their assessment and in their vital signs. Watcher helps us because in the background it's monitoring for these little tiny things.
And a new CDC report just out found that flu hospitalizations in Chile, which often previews the flu season here in the U.S., were actually lower than pre-pandemic levels. That's attributed to higher vaccination rates. Back to you.
Good info there. All right, Gabe, thank you.
And now it's time for your morning news now weather, and we're tracking showers and thunderstorms for some parts of the country as we head into the weekend.
Yeah, a lot going on. Let's check in with meteorologist Michelle Grossman for more. Hey, Michelle.
Hey guys, happy Friday. And yeah, unfortunately, some of us are starting out our weekend with showers, and we're going to see some showers in the forecast pretty much all weekend long in the south. And then by Halloween, we're going to see it into the northeast. So first, starting in the south, we have some showers falling this morning, even some thunder, some lightning out there. We've been seeing it all night long, and we're seeing it this morning as well. We're also looking at the chance for severe weather as we go throughout the evening hours, afternoon hours. That's in portions of eastern Texas. So just south of Houston, we could see winds gusting up to 60 miles per per hour. Could see some hail as well. That's been pretty persistent with some of these storms. And also a few tornadoes are possible. We're not expecting an outbreak of tornadoes, but one or two is possible. Then as we go throughout tomorrow, this is a very slow-moving cold front. So it's going to move very slowly to portions of central Gulf states. We're looking at winds gusting once again to 60 miles per hour as a risk. Isolated hail, low tornado risk, but not zero. So that includes cities like Hattiesburg. We're looking at New Orleans and also Baton Rouge. This is later on Saturday into Saturday evening. And this will be with us pretty much all weekend long. Here's the setup. We have a cold front that's moving to the east. It's bringing showers and storms to central Texas right now. We have long stretching storms from Oklahoma City pretty much to San Angelo. Then as we go throughout time, we're going to see this moving off to the east, bringing the chance for some really heavy rain. We could see up to 3 inches in some spots. Tomorrow, that frontal system moves off to the Gulf Coast states. We're looking at strong storms from Louisiana, also to Alabama. And you can see along that front those really bright colors. That's where we could see some really heavy rainfall as well. And then as we go throughout Sunday, that rain spreads into the Ohio Valley. So it sort of expands, but it loses its punch a bit. So we're not expecting severe weather, but we're expecting some soaking rains from Georgia to Kentucky. And this is widespread in terms of the rainfall over the next 3 days, where you see those brighter colors, the oranges, the yellows, the reds. That's where we're expecting some localized flooding. So a lot of people are involved with that threat for localized flooding. It's going to be a cool rain as well. Temperatures in the 40s and 50s, well below normal for this time of year. 57 in Midland, Texas, 66 in El Paso. But it's going to be mild in the north and actually a lot of sunshine as we start out Saturday. So we're looking at temperatures in the 60s in the Midwest, the Great Lakes, into portions of New England, also the Northeast, 69 degrees in Cincinnati. And we're going to keep it warm early next week as well, guys. We're going to be at 68 degrees by next Tuesday. I know, Savannah. That's not great news. You want that crisp, cool air. It's coming, I promise.
Yeah, Joe and I have a disagreement here. I am ready for fall and cold and sweaters.
I think I side with Joe on this one.
I mean, I get it. I know, like, I'll be like, what was I thinking in a few months? But I don't know. It's time. You know?
It's Halloween. Yeah, that makes sense.
Love to lean in. All right, Michelle, thanks. See you in a bit.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.